Thank you. Now, Ms. Hodson-Thomas. Ms. Hodson-Thomas, could you just give us your full name for the record?
Katina Hodson-Thomas.
And do you wish to affirm or swear an oath?
Swear an oath. I, Katina Hodson-Thomas, swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth and nothing.
Thank you. Please sit down. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Evans.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ms Hodson-Thomas, you were summoned to appear before the Royal Commission today,
Yes.
and the Commission provided with the summons a list of topics which may be covered in your examination,
Yes.
and invited you to prepare a statement in relation to those topics.
Yes.
And I believe you have in front of you a copy of the statement which you've caused to be prepared.
Yes, that's correct.
You've read the contents of that?
Yes, I have.
Those contents are true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they are.
I tender Ms Hodson-Thomas' statement.
And does it have a number?
My version does not, but I'm sure my learned friends does.
Commissioners, that's WIT.0001.001.0023.
The witness statement of Katie Hodson-Thomas, dated the 7th of May 2021, and bearing the document identifier number that Mr. Lee has just read out, will be admitted into evidence as an exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Ms Hodson-Thomas, your witness statement explains that you've been a member of the Gaming and Wagering Commission since 9 January 2018. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in the course of today's discussion, I'll often refer to that as the GWC for brevity.
Yes.
And you also explain in your witness statement at paragraph 10, if that can be brought up, please, that you do not have any qualifications or experience specifically in relation to the regulation and oversight of casinos and casino gambling, apart from that gained from your role as a member. So I'd like to explore for a moment the nature of your experience that you had prior to first becoming a member of the GWC, and understand that on the first occasion you remember was in January 2011 until November 2012. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So at that time, prior to becoming a member in 2011, you had previously been a member of the Legislative Assembly in the state?
Yes, that's correct.
And during those years between 1996 and 2008, are those the years?
That is correct.
During those years, you had been a parliamentary secretary
Yes.
and a shadow minister.
Yes.
You were never a minister of the government,
No.
and so you were never in a position where you had to administer or regulate a department.
That's correct.
From 2008 to 2009, you worked at a lobbying and consulting firm, Hawker Britton,
Correct.
and at that stage you represented the interests of your clients, which were private businesses, generally in their dealings with government.
That's correct too.
Would it be fair to say that that was essentially an advocacy or lobbying role?
Yes, it was.
From that point until your appointment to the GWC, you had three other roles, being Special Counsel at the Australian Hotels Association,
Correct.
Corporate Affairs Manager at the Tourism Council of Western Australia,
Yes.
and Chief Executive Officer of the Caravan Industry of Western Australia.
Yes.
And is it again fair to say that in each of those roles you were responsible for, amongst other things, advocacy to government on behalf of the industry in which you worked?
Yes.
And so while those positions weren't strictly lobbying positions, they were all concerned with promoting the industries in which you worked rather than regulating those industries.
Yes, that's correct.
And you had not worked at a regulatory agency prior to being appointed to the GWC?
Yes.
And in addition to not working in the casino industry prior to that time in 2011, it's also the case, isn't it, that you hadn't at that stage worked in the racing industry
Yes.
or the gaming industry more generally?
Yes.
So would it be fair to say, coming back to paragraph 10 of your statement, that as at 2011, it wasn't just that you didn't have relevance in relation to the regulation and oversight of casinos and casino gaming, but you didn't at that stage have any experience in acting as a government regulator,
Yes.
and any experience in the casino, racing, gaming or wagering industries.
Yes.
Additionally, in the time between resigning from the GWC in 2012 up until your reappointment in 2018, you worked as a director of a consulting firm.
Yes.
And you didn't at any stage in that time work for a government regulator,
No.
and you didn't at any stage in that time work in the casino, racing, gaming or wagering industries.
No.
Going to your appointment now in 2011 to the GWC, once you were appointed, and that can be taken down from the screen please, once you were appointed, did you seek any formal training in relation to government regulation or casino operations?
No. Other than what is stated in my statement.
And what do you understand the position today in respect of the training that is available for members of the GWC, that is since you were reappointed in 2018?
The training that's available to us today?
Yes.
Well, there hasn't been any training offered. I've sought to undertake the responsible service of gambling. Sorry, I'll address the commissioners. I had sought to undertake some training through Crown to understand their processes and the initiatives that they have in terms of problem gambling specifically. And I have expressed an interest in attending the AML CTF training, but I haven't undertaken any other.
And the way you gave that answer made it sound as if you independently had sought out that training. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So has any training been offered to you by the GWC since you've rejoined in 2018?
No.
Do you know what the training budget is today for members of the GWC?
No.
Do you know if there is a training budget?
I can't recall having seen a budget for training in the papers that are provided to us.
Are you aware of any other GWC members who have sought or received training in relation to particularly casino gaming or regulation?
You're talking about members around the commission table?
Correct.
No, I'm not aware.
Are you aware of whether the GWC members are encouraged to seek such training, perhaps by the chairman or other officers of the department?
No.
Going back now to your appointment in July 2011, I just want to have you explain to the Commission how it was that that appointment came about. Did you respond to an advertisement? Were you directly approached? What was the process?
It's some time ago. I can't recall whether the minister at the time, who was Tuck Waldron, made approaches, or whether someone within his office made approaches to me directly. But I received a letter of appointment from the then minister.
So the way you explained that when you said made approaches to you, it sounds as if you did not volunteer or put your hand up for the
No.
position. You were approached.
I was approached.
And you were approached from the minister or the minister's office.
Yes.
You were not approached by someone in the Gaming and Wagering Commission.
No.
And as you mentioned before, it's some time ago, so you might not recall this, but did you have any discussions prior to your being appointed as to what the role entailed and what you would be required to do?
No, other than the, as I've mentioned in my statement, when I met with Steve Spalaroso from the department.
That's in relation to 2018, I think.
No, that's in relation to 2011. If it says 2018 here, then that's incorrect. And I apologise if I've erred, but
I apologise, it's paragraph 20 of your statement where you do indicate that you met with Mr Spalarosa in 2011.
yes, that's correct. I met with Mr Spalaroso and he provided me with the lever arch folder of materials and went through what was in the folder, providing me the relevant legislation.
And again, appreciating it is a long time ago and you may not be able to recall, was there any synopsis or summary given to you at that stage as to what the purpose of the GWC is and what your role would be?
Yes, I'm
What was
sure
that?
I'm sure he gave me an overview of what would be expected of me as a commission member and what the types of activities that we would have oversight for.
Do you recall now what that was?
It's, as I said, it's a long time ago.
Turning away then from 2011 and going to your witness statement at paragraphs 30 to 33, you've set out the remuneration that you receive currently as a member of the GWC since rejoining in 2018. Mm-hmm. And at present, it's roughly $16,000 per year. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, is that a fixed figure which doesn't vary regardless of how much work you do in the GWC at any time?
Yes, that's a fixed figure.
And I'm going to ask you some more questions about the demands of the role later. But at this stage and at a high level, do you consider that the amount of remuneration that you receive is reasonable given the amount of work that you have to do for the GWC?
In more specific times, no, it's not. Particularly given the complexity that we're dealing with now, the changing landscape in terms of gambling. So no, I don't believe it is.
And how long has that landscape been changing, as you say?
It's certainly been changing for a long period. I mean, the Act came into effect in the 80s. Here we are in 2021. We've got disruptive technologies. There's internet gambling. There's a whole range of issues that the legislation really is not fit for purpose for any longer.
All right, I'm going to ask some questions now about the work that you do as a GWC member and in particular the process aspects. If we can go to paragraph 25 of your witness statement, and there you explain what happened after you rejoined the Commission in 2018. You say that you received an iPad at that stage which contained relevant materials.
Yes, that's correct.
And at 25.3, you then explain that the materials for meetings are uploaded to the iPad ahead of time.
25.3?
Yes.
Yes, that's correct.
And then after meetings have been completed, you then receive minutes for those meetings and they arrive on the iPad as well.
They do, or they arrive by email in a Dropbox link.
Okay. Is the process of what you're describing to us, receiving the agenda, then receiving the emails, is that all essentially automated? Do you have to do anything, or you can be passive and the information comes to you?
You're passive and the information comes to you. Obviously, you have to download and log into your iPad and then open up the document in iAnnotate.
Yes. And we've seen some of the materials that have been returned to the Commission by answer to summonses. Would it be fair to say that the agendas for many of your meetings are quite voluminous?
Yes, they are.
And is it also accurate to say that they often contain proposals or applications, including from the Perth Casino, along with a recommendation from a departmental officer as to whether that proposal or recommendation should be endorsed by the GWC?
Yes, that's correct.
And in terms of the departmental officer, I mentioned that a moment ago. When I say department, I would ordinarily be referring to the Department of Local Government, Sports and Cultural Industries.
Yes.
In terms of the items of the agenda that you receive and proposals that might be contained within it, is it the GWC members that do up that agenda, or is it done up for you by someone else?
No, it's done up for us by staff.
Now, the Commission has received written evidence from Mr Michael Connolly, and just for a transcript reference, I'm not asking for us to go to this on the screen. It's MCN.001.001.001, paragraph 87. The information that the Commission has received from Mr Connolly is that while he was the Chief Casino Officer, or CCO, he had effective control of the agenda and the manner in which items at the GWC meetings were discussed. Do you know Mr Connolly?
Yes, I do.
Do you agree with that assessment?
Can you repeat what he said?
That while he was the CCO, he had effective control of the agenda and manner in which items at the GWC meetings were discussed.
Yes, I believe that is correct. That if he were unhappy with a paper, and I believe that he had even mentioned it at a meeting, that he would send it back to staff member to say it wasn't up to scratch, that it needed further embellishment. So yes.
And since you rejoined the GWC in 2018, has Mr. Connolly also been responsible for writing many of the recommendations the GWC has considered?
I would say no.
Any?
Quite possibly, but without documentation in front of me, I can't answer that.
Is there a wide range of people that write proposals for the consideration of the GWC?
Some of them come up without a staff member's name, but normally it might refer to Mark Beecroft or Sandy Delpreet or another member of staff within the department.
And have you and the other members of the GWC generally adopted or approved recommendations, whether from Mr. Connolly or anyone else?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
So, in your role as a GWC member, is it ordinarily the case that you and the other members will approve or endorse recommendations that are made to you by departmental officers?
We can do, but we can also reject them if we're uncomfortable with them.
And accepting that that's open to you or possible for you, is it more often than not the case that you do endorse the recommendations that are made?
It's probably yes.
Can we please bring up paragraph 37 of the statement? So over there in the statement you say that prior to the ILGA investigation into Crown Sydney, you estimate you spent 2 days a month reading the materials and attending meetings. Is that correct?
Yes.
And is that 2-day estimate the cumulative total for both preparation for and then attendance at the meetings?
Yes.
And then at 36.3 of your witness statement, you mentioned that you sometimes have to do additional research. Does that 2-day estimate likewise include any additional research that you may have to do?
Yes.
Now, if you are doing research, how does that work? Is it something that you get on the internet yourself and investigate, or do you contact departmental officers and ask for help, or how's it done?
No, I do it myself.
Have you ever sought assistance from departmental officers between meetings?
No, I haven't.
Do you know if any other GWC members have ever made use of departmental officers between meetings for support?
I'm not aware of it, but it would be a question that I would be asking them.
Have you, well actually before I go there, in relation to the meetings themselves, I believe they're once a month?
That's correct.
And then I think we discussed earlier that once meetings had been completed, you would then receive an email or similar with the minutes of that meeting to consider.
Yes.
Between those times, between meetings, do you ever have any ad hoc communications with other members of the GWC to discuss issues that are before the Commission?
No.
Have you ever had such ad hoc or out of session discussions with GWC members in relation to work before the GWC?
No.
Do you ever follow up outside of the moments before the meeting where you're doing perhaps your own research? Do you ever follow up independently with outstanding matters that may have been unresolved from a meeting prior to the next meeting? Or is your work essentially confined to those days around the meeting?
It's confined to those days around the meeting.
And do you consider that the remuneration that you currently receive is sufficient to allow you to do anything more than the time that you currently spend in that preparation for those meetings?
Can you ask me that question again? You lost me somewhere there.
I'm
Sorry.
Do you consider that the remuneration that you currently receive is sufficient to allow you to do anything more than you currently do, in addition to the time that you already spend now preparing for and attending meetings?
No.
Okay. Having gone through those questions, would it be fair to describe your role in practice as being to, 1, receive the agenda for each month,
Yes.
2, carefully consider that agenda in detail,
Yes.
and then 3, meet to note, approve or reject each of the items of the agenda?
Yes.
And given that process that we've gone through, would it be fair to describe the work of the GWC in the time that you have been a member as largely reactive rather than proactive?
Yes.
I've got some questions that I'd like to ask you now in relation to delegation. Can we bring up paragraph 50 of the statement, please? Now, at that paragraph, you touch on the GWC's delegation of its powers and functions. I'll just let you read that for a moment before I take you to two recent delegations.
Yes.
If we can please have called up GWC.0001.0007.0184. And looking at this, it's an instrument of delegation to a person holding the position of Deputy Director General from April 2020. Do you recognise that?
Yes, I've signed it.
And can you explain to the Commission the circumstances in which this delegation was issued?
I would like to actually see the board paper that it refers to. I know that it is a year ago that this was.
We may have to attempt to research and bring that back to you.
Yeah, sorry.
But for the moment, you certainly accept that that's a delegation that was issued while you were a member of the GWC?
That is correct.
And you'll note that, of course, the person who is the delegate is the Deputy Director General, and then there are 4 acts where that person is said to receive, quote, all of the Commission's powers. Do you see that?
Yes, I do. Betting Control Act, Gaming and Wagering Commission Act, Casino Control Act, Racing and Wagering Western Australian Act, other than the power of delegation itself. Yes, but I'd still like to see, for the purpose of reminding myself, what the board pack actually provided.
We will see if we can obtain that and come back to that later in questioning, if that's possible. In relation to that delegation, and obviously given that you are wanting to remind yourself, is it the case that there are numerous delegations that you've issued over time, or that the GWC has issued over time while you've been a member?
Yes.
Would you be able to have an estimate as to how many that would have been? Are we talking in the 5, 10, 20?
I can't.
Can we please now call up GWC.0002.0016.0367? And page 5. Is it possible to call up the non-redacted version? So do you see that resolution there in the box, Resolve 3 of 2021?
Yes, and it refers again to the delegate to the Director Strategic Regulation by signing the instrument of delegation dated 16th of February 2021. Its powers conferred by the Betting Control Act, similar to the one that you previously presented to me.
Yes. Now, you took part in the meeting where that delegation was approved, is that correct?
Yes.
And do you recall, I mean, we can see from above there's a comment as to the circumstances in which that came to pass, but do you recall those circumstances?
The circumstances that came to pass.
As set out in the paragraph above the resolve box that explain the background to it.
Yes,
And you remember that from the meeting itself?
I do.
Okay. Now, again, I'll just ask you to note for the moment that the delegation's made out to the Director of Strategic Regulation, and that, once again, it is a conferral of all of the powers conferred by those various acts.
Of the previous delegation that was issued to the then casino officer in 2020. Are they one and the same?
Well, I'll come back to that in a moment. For the moment, I'm just asking you to note that it's saying that it's delegating to that position, Director Strategic Regulation.
Yes.
Its powers conferred by, so all of its powers by those 4 acts. So just asking you to note that for the moment. And then lastly, there's a third delegation to show you, which is GWC.0001.0007.0183. And this is obviously one that's from 2012, as you can see there. We're still working our way through all of the materials that have been provided to the Commission, so I'm not absolutely positive that this delegation remains on foot, but our understanding at present is that this delegation is on foot. Is this a delegation that you recognise?
Can you go down, please, or go up?
So down towards the signature block?
Yes. I don't recall seeing this, no.
Okay. Were you aware of, perhaps not this delegation, but generally other delegations that have been issued by the GWC?
Yes.
Does the GWC have a single register where you can see all the delegations that have been issued and are still extant?
I don't believe that's on our iPad in iAnnotate.
Are you aware of whether such a register exists?
No, I'm not.
Having had a look at those delegations and the way that they are framed, and again, looking at this one for a moment, the language here again, this one to the Deputy Chairman, Gaming and Wagering Commission, all of the Commission's powers, and again, those 4 acts that you've read before.
Yes.
Can you explain to the Commission what is your understanding of the effect of issuing a delegation such as this?
Then that person has the decision-making powers in which to undertake specific aspects of each of those acts.
When you say specific aspects, what about that delegation do you understand limits the delegation to only specific aspects?
Well, it doesn't really provide me with any information that shows me what those limitations are. As I said, I would really like to have seen what the background paper was in relation to the determination to make that.
Understanding that certainly would be useful to know the reasons for it, but right now I'm asking you about the effect.
Yep.
And you indicated before that it was the case that the delegation allowed certain powers. I'm just trying to understand why you are of the view that it's only certain powers as opposed to all powers of the Commission.
It does say Commission powers conferred with effect from 18th December, all of the Commission powers confirmed.
So would you agree that on the face of the document it suggests
Yeah.
it's all powers?
Yes, it is.
And in terms of the effect, again, of the issuing of a delegation, once a delegation is issued, is the GWC still able to use those same powers?
My understanding is that where there is the delegation of powers, the Chief Casino Officer has in the past always referred what those actions have been in terms of those delegations. So there's an opportunity, obviously, to have oversight as to whether the Commission makes a determination as to whether those delegations have gone too far. But my understanding that has not been the case to date.
When you say that there's an opportunity for oversight, does that mean that you understand that the powers are not fully used until they have been referred back to the GWC? Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And what was the reason that the GWC, not so much in relation to each individual delegation, but as a broader conceptual approach, why is it that the GWC uses delegations?
Is it possible to refer to Section 7 of the Act to refer to the duties that we have under the Act? Because a lot of that is in relation to operational matters where inspectorate are undertaking activities within the casino, doing audits.
If Section 7 of the Act can be brought up to it. And that's PUB.0004.0005.
See, I'm not referring to the Casino Control Act. I was actually referring to the GWC Act. But
Yeah, so 0005.0107 is the start of that Act. And if we could please go to Section 7. And if you could indicate to the operator where you'd like to look.
So our role, fundamentally, is outlined in the duties of the Commission through, from what I can see here, 1 through to Part E, if it went over. But it is the operational matters that I think a lot of these delegations relate to in terms of... You've gone over a page, sorry. Can you go back?
Back to 7A.
Yes. So my understanding would be that the delegations allow for more operational matters.
All right. And that's a comment that you make as well at paragraph 50 of your witness statement. You refer there to the delegations extend to the day-to-day operational activities. But do you accept, as we have looked at the delegations a moment ago, that they're not limited in their terms to operational activities? It's merely explained in the broad way of saying all powers of the Commission, of the GWC. Do you accept that?
Council, I'd still like to see some background paper before I even begin to answer that question.
Well, let me take you back to the actual documentation itself. So that's GWC.0001.007.0184. And again, I'm not at this stage asking you as to what the rationale may have been for any particular delegation. I'm just asking whether you accept that the delegation itself, in terms of the language it uses, is framed so as to confer all powers rather than powers in relation to operational activities.
Yes.
Do you accept that on the face of the delegation, the delegate could do any of the things that the GWC does in its usual meetings and not those limited only to operational matters?
Yes.
And we've seen there that there are 3 separate delegations which confer all of the Commission's powers, and you've indicated that you were aware of other delegations to other persons as well.
Yes.
Would you agree that the fact that Parliament has conferred powers onto the GWC suggests that the intention is that the GWC should be the primary person to use those powers?
Yes.
And are you at all concerned that by using multiple delegations which delegate all of the Commission's powers or the GWC's powers to other persons, that it may have a tendency to subvert the intended operation of the Act?
Possibly.
Then you also say at your witness statement at paragraph 50, if that could be brought back up again, and you say in the final sentence, those activities, referring to the use of the delegation, are reported to the GWC in the agenda papers for the GWC's oversight and to
Yes.
inform decisions.
Yes.
Now, the delegations that we've looked at don't appear to be subject to any express requirement for such reporting. Do you know if there's any written GWC policy that requires such reporting?
No.
Given that, is it possible for the GWC to know with certainty when the powers that it has entrusted or delegated to others have been exercised?
No.
Returning again now, please, to GWC.0002.0016.0367. And I think it might be 2 pages further. Thank you. If you can return to page 5, please. So looking there again at the person to whom the delegation was made, the position, it's Director Strategic Regulation. Now, do you understand that to be a reference to a GWC position or a departmental position? And again, by departmental, I mean Department of Local Government, Sports and Cultural Industries.
A member of the department, yes.
And do you recall that when we looked at some of the other delegations, one of the other delegations was to the Deputy Director General?
Yes.
And again, do you understand that to be a reference to a GWC or departmental officer?
Departmental officer.
Now, if a delegation is issued to a person by reference to their departmental role, do you accept they would only be entitled to exercise that power while acting in their departmental role?
Yes.
And if a person is acting in their departmental role, do you accept that they would be subject to the usual obligations to act in the best interests of the department?
Yes.
And do you accept that the best interests of the department might not always coincide with the best interests of the GWC?
No.
I might give you an example to think about in the context of what you've explained in your witness statement as to the resource scarcity and the difficulties in getting proper support from the department. If one example was a departmental officer who was also a Gaming Wagering Commission officer, perhaps the Chief Casino Officer, if they were heavily overworked and required to decide between spending a very large amount of time to carefully work through a large agenda item, a proposal from a casino, for example, and make a decision as to whether to endorse and not endorse a request, or alternatively spend that same time carrying out other pressing departmental work, do you accept that that might give rise to a conflict?
My personal view is that the Chief Casino Officer should be principally only responsible for that role.
And accepting that that may be the case, looking at these delegations which delegate to persons in their capacity as departmental officers and so require them to act as departmental officers when exercising those powers, do you agree that that might give rise to conflicts between their duties to the GWC on the one hand and the department on the other?
Yes, it well could.
At a broader level, and moving away from the delegations for a moment, at a broader level, do you consider that in practice there is a clear distinction between the GWC and the department and the officers and the work of either?
I've had two experiences of sitting on the commission, so I'll draw from both. So my first appointment was when it was a standalone authority, racing, gaming and liquor. And certainly there was a clear focus on racing, gaming and liquor, whereas I've been able to see very clearly that the current situation, the Chief Casino Officer has more broadly other responsibilities in terms of local government, cultural industries, sport, and it's clearly not an ideal situation.
So has it been that way ever since you were reappointed in January 2018, or is it something which is more recent? Can you give an indication to the commissioners?
I was appointed early. I was appointed in 2018. My reflection at that time was very early in the changes of the machinery of government. But as time has progressed, you could see that staff were under enormous strain in terms of providing information in a timely manner.
And when you say as time has progressed, does that suggest that that is getting worse over time?
Well, it's been a very challenging time for them, I would say. The agency has had to deal with local government reform, the divestment of the TAB, which didn't go ahead, but certainly the preparation and the work that was undertaken by the department during that period clearly has put strain on the resources within the agency.
Moving away then from that issue, I'd like to ask some questions about the relationship between the GWC and the Chief Casino Officer, the CCO. Starting at paragraph 48 of your witness statement, you make the point that the GWC doesn't have its own staff or resources and so has to make arrangements with DLGSCI to utilise the services of officers and employees.
Yes.
You have that?
Mm-hmm.
So in relation then to the officer, the Chief Casino Officer, can I please be shown GWC.002.0016.0063? And these are minutes from a meeting where it appears that there is reference to Michael Connolly in 2012, becoming Deputy Director General, at which time we understand that he was then also made the Chief Casino Officer. And you'll note there that in the first paragraph under the apologies, the second sentence begins, "The Commission welcome Mr Connolly back to the Commission."
Mm-hmm.
You can see at the top there that you were present at that meeting.
Yes, I can.
Do you have any recollection of that meeting?
No. It's a long time ago.
No, I totally understand. Maybe not by reference to that meeting itself, but do you have any broader recollection about the GWC ever, at that stage in 2012, resolving to appoint Mr Connolly as the Chief Casino Officer?
Look, I think there was a change in departmental staff. Janine Belling was the Chief Casino Officer, as I recall, and she went on to do other things. I think, in fact, she went to the United States of America. So I can't add more than that.
Okay. More recently, bringing up GWC.0002.0016.0367 and calling up page 3 to start. Now, again, you can see in the first paragraph there's reference in the second sentence to an overview of recent events that led to Mr Beecroft being appointed.
Yes.
And you can see again that you were attending as a member in person there on that page.
Yes.
And then down to page 5 again, we've been there before today, there's that resolution. And you'll see there's a comment there that the resolution is to support the appointment of Mr Beecroft.
Yes.
Now, does that suggest that you and the other members of the GWC were of the opinion that at that time, at the time of the meeting, Mr Beecroft had already been appointed as CCO and you were essentially endorsing that, or were you appointing him at that meeting? What was your understanding?
My understanding was that he had already been appointed.
Who by?
I would imagine the Director General.
Do you recall there ever being discussion amongst the members of the GWC as to whether that was the appropriate way for the process to work, whether that's what the legislation contemplated?
No.
Is it your view, based on what we've just looked at in those minutes and perhaps discussions with other GWC members, that that is the way the system works, that the department, the Director General, nominates someone and that the GWC must then accept that person as the CCO?
I think that if anyone had any concerns, they would have raised them. Ideally, there has to be a better process. And obviously the Royal Commission is looking into how we can do things better. Clearly, we are being very reactive to a situation that had evolved as a consequence of many things.
Do you think it might pose challenges for good corporate governance to be a commission which is obliged to accept persons essentially imposed on it by other parties?
Yes.
So those are the questions I had for you in relation to the Chief Casino Officer. I'm just going to ask some other questions about officers of the GWC more broadly.
Mm-hmm.
Do you and the GWC as a whole exercise any form of supervision or oversight for the work of those officers or the Chief Casino Officer?
Can you say that again? Sorry, I was concentrating on pouring my water.
Of course. Does the GWC exercise any form of supervision or oversight of the work of the Chief Casino Officer?
No,
Does it have any oversight of the work of other officers doing work on behalf of the GWC?
no,
Does it have any policies or guidelines that apply to officers doing work on its behalf?
no,
Does it conduct any form of performance review or appraisal of the officers doing work on its behalf?
no,
Does it have any direct interaction with the officers doing work on its behalf at all?
no.
Do you ever hear from officers at meetings if there is an agenda item that they have presented on?
Yes, they come to the meeting and present on a specific agenda matter, and we have the opportunity then to ask questions.
How often might that occur?
Fairly regularly, and certainly in the last two meetings there have been a number of members that have come before us. I think Donna Kennedy was at the last meeting.
And is Donna a departmental officer who's also a GWC officer?
Yes.
All right, returning now to the issue of resourcing and support and going back to paragraph 48 of your statement, if that can be called up, please. Now, you can see there that you say it's required to make arrangements. That is, the GWC is required to make arrangements with the DLGSC to utilise the services of officers and employees. Is that your understanding?
When I refer to GWC, I mean the Commission as a whole, yes.
Absolutely. Can we please bring up PUB.0004.0005.0139? And we're looking at section 18.1 of the Gaming and Wagering Commission Act. And you see that it says the Commission may, by arrangement with relevant employing authorities, make use either full-time or part-time of the services of any officer or employee. Is that the section of the Act that you had in mind when you said that you understood that the GWC was required to make arrangements with the department?
Quite possibly.
In your witness statement, you later say at paragraph 57 that the quality of the departmental work that you receive is good, but essentially the quantity is lacking. Is that fair? A fair summary of what you say?
57, I say, I do not consider that the quantity of the support has been adequate.
Yes.
Yes.
And again, you re-emphasise that point in paragraph 59 of your statement, where you say that since your second appointment, you've observed that the department is under-resourced.
Yes.
And then finally, at paragraph 60, you say that you've observed a decrease in the number of staff and that key individuals are under enormous pressure.
Yes.
And again, I asked this question before, but having gone through and looked at those sections of the statement, is it the case that things are steadily worse since 2018, or is it the case that it's been bad at 2018 and it's stayed bad throughout?
Steadily worse.
Now, in order to examine the department of the GWC's resourcing and financial position a little more closely, I'm going to take you to some financial documents. The first of which is GWC.002.0016.0228. And I think it's page 212 to start with. Now, as best we can understand, this is the first budget that was proposed and approved by the GWC after you were reappointed in 2018. And this is obviously the item that recommends the approval. Do you recognise this form of documentation?
I'm sure I saw it in the meeting agenda pack.
Okay. If we go to page 219, that's page 219.
Can you enlarge that, please?
Thank you. Now, on the middle of the page, the left-hand side, you've got the heading receipts there. Do you have that?
Yes, casino licence fee, employee
Yes.
licence, yes.
And if we go across to the last column, you can see that the budget for 2018-19 was an estimated 2.9 million for the casino licence fee.
Yes,
And then above that, in the payment section, you can see there's an item services provided by DLGSC, and that's 4.14 million estimated for 2018-19. Do you see that?
yes, I do.
Now, can you just tell the Commission what your understanding is of, first, the casino licence fee?
It's the fee that the casino pays to government to hold its licence.
What do you understand is the purpose of that fee? What's to be done with it?
It is actually to support the operations of the department in terms of GWC, not specifically GWC, but staff, that inspectors, the collective group.
And so your understanding is that that money is available for the use of the department for all of the department's functions?
Yes. But when you're referring to services provided to DLGSC, that 4.14 million is obviously for the whole Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries.
If I was to suggest to you and let you have the opportunity to consider the suggestion that the services provided by DLGSC may represent what DLGSC charges the Gaming and Wagering Commission for the use of its
Yes, it
staff.
is actually. Sorry, I'm looking. Yes, it is.
And,
You're correct.
and in terms of that charge, what do you understand the charge is made up of?
The services provided, obviously, it would be for a number of things.
Do you recall whether at this meeting to discuss the budget or any other meetings that have discussed the budget, talking with the GWC members as to precisely what it was that you were purchasing with that money?
No, I don't recall that.
If we can go back a few pages now to 213. And you can see the second heading on that page is recoup to DLGSC. And you see that there's a note that says that essentially it's been increased by $113,000, quote, to be able to support the Commission.
Yes, I do.
Do you understand what that's referring to? What's been changed to better support the GWC?
And no, I can't tell you why. There's been an increase of 113,000, no.
Is this as much detail as you ever get on the GWC when you are considering budgets and deciding whether or not to approve them?
Yes, it is.
Do you agree here that the budget doesn't provide sufficient detail for you or the GWC to know what it is that it's paying for?
Well, I would honestly say that I don't have a strong financial lens. There are other members on the Commission, more particularly in recent times, that have been appointed that have a greater financial lens and often ask very deep and posing questions.
Who are you thinking of when you say that?
Jodie Meadows and Carmelina Fiorentini.
And they're the people who have a more finance-focused approach.
Yes, they both have financial backgrounds.
If we can now call up, please, GWC.0002.0016.0226 and go to page 8. If I can... And you can see there that this page suggests that, notwithstanding the lack of clarity as to what it was that the budget items were for, the GWC has approved the budget for that year. Do you agree?
Yes, including conference and seminar fees of 20,000.
And that's a point I wanted to ask you about, because the way that's framed there is it's a stipulation that you only approve provided that the amount, the conference and seminars fee amount, is increased by 20,000 to allow for Western Australia to host the 2019 Australian Gaming CEOs Conference. So do you agree that that item suggests that the GWC was aware of the fact that it was able to request additional funding from government
Yes,
in the event that it considered such funding was necessary?
yes,
And I'll take you now to the most recent financial year, the 2020-21 financial year, on GWC.0002.0016.0310 and page 157, I think it is. Oh, and we're already there, I beg your pardon, page 159. Again, this is item 11.2, like the one we looked at before. This is a budget proposal. And again, we've got those same columns to look at. The casino gaming licence fee of about $3 million in 2020-21. Do you see that?
yes.
And again, the services provided by DLGSC of...
4,347,606.
Exactly.
Yep.
Now, I do just note at the outset that according to the minutes, you were not in attendance at this meeting where it was actually resolved to approve the budget. But you would have received the agenda prior to the budget, or prior to that meeting, rather.
What was the date of the meeting?
The item was 11 August. It would have been a late August 2020 meeting.
Yes, and the reason I wasn't at that meeting was my mother passed away, so I might not have even read the paper.
I understand.
Yeah. So, but please ask me questions. But yes, I should have read the paper.
Yes. We haven't located any reference to there being any objection or concern raised by you either when the agenda was issued or in the minutes afterwards discussing the budget item. Is it fair to say that you didn't have any concerns with the proposed budget for that year?
Yes, it's fair to say that.
And if you look at the fourth paragraph, again, at item 11.2, well, underneath the statement of comprehensive income, it says, however, DLGSC is proposing to only increase the fee for services provided by 5% to support the commission. Do you see that?
However, DLGSC is proposing to only increase the fee for service provided by 5%. Yes.
And above that, there's a statement saying that their KPIs show that there's been casino and gaming activity that's increased by 11%.
Yes.
But do you see that there's no suggestion
That it should increase by 11%.
My question is, do you see that the reference is to casino gaming has increased, but there's no reference to saying that you are being provided with additional departmental resources? There's no statement saying that you're getting more person time or more inspections or
No.
more work out of the department. That's simply increasing the money that you're asked to pay.
Yes, that's correct.
And do you accept that that increased payment couldn't be reflective of increased salary costs for the department, given that currently the state government is in a public sector freeze?
Yes.
But again, in this year, the GWC approved the budget nonetheless. Do you have any explanation for the Commission as to why it is that in circumstances where you are concerned, or the GWC is concerned about its lack of resources, it hasn't requested additional resources from the Minister and has continued to approve the budgets proposed by the department?
It's certainly a matter we haven't discussed as members, and it's a failing on our part.
A related question to this, just in relation to the nature of the services being received by the GWC for that $4.3 odd million that we saw there for departmental services. Are you aware of how many staff the GWC is making use of, whether on a full-time or a part-time basis?
No, I couldn't tell you what the FTEs of the department specific to GWC is, no.
Do you know how many departmental staff are inspectors at all, as opposed to casino inspectors or racing inspectors or any other type of inspectors?
No, I couldn't give you a figure.
If we bring up PUB.0004 .0005.0107. And again, this is looking at the Gaming and Wagering Act, Gaming and Wagering Commission Act, and we're looking at section 18, subsection 1. And you'll see there that the language used is that the Commission may make arrangement, and I'm paraphrasing, to make use either of full-time or part-time services. So would you accept that the Act contemplates or expects that the GWC will enter into arrangements which essentially provide for a certain number of persons, full-time or part-time, to do the work of the GWC?
Yes.
And if you go to 18.2, please, over the page, you see that it says there an arrangement under subsection 1 is to be made on such terms as are agreed to by the parties.
Yes, I see that.
Do you agree that in context the parties in this case are the GWC on one hand and the department on the other?
Yes.
And are you aware of what the terms of the arrangement are?
No.
Have you ever seen a document which sets out the terms of that arrangement?
No.
Are you aware of whether a formal written arrangement exists?
I don't believe so.
And would you agree that as a matter of sound corporate governance, GWC should be in a position where it has a clear sense of what it is that it's purchasing from the department?
Yes.
Because if it doesn't, it's not able to know if it's getting value for money,
Yes.
or whether the fees for one activity are being used to cross-subsidise other activities.
Yes, correct.
I'm just noting that it's 3 o'clock. Would you like a break for a moment,
If you wouldn't mind, yes. Thank you.
Commissioner?
How long would you like?
Just a bathroom break.
Minutes. All right, we'll, 5 minutes. We'll come back in 5 minutes' time.
Hearing is adjourned.
you. Please sit down. Yes, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Commissioner. The next area that I'd like to ask some questions about is the issue of conflict of interest.
Yes.
And at paragraph 64 of your written statement, you
Yes.
say that you are not aware of a GWC conflict of interest policy for staff and other persons carrying out duties on behalf of GWC.
Yes.
Can we please call up GWC.001.0011.0003 and look for page 9. Now, do you recognise this document, the Code of Conduct? Perhaps we can go to page 1 and show the cover, please.
I think I have a copy of this. Yes.
You do recognise that?
Yep.
Looking at the top of page 9, do you see there's a discussion as to conflicts of interests and gifts and benefits?
Yes.
Had you seen that before? Had you had an opportunity to read that before?
Yes, I have read this.
All right. So when you said that you weren't aware of a conflict of interest policy, did you mean a standalone policy as opposed to discussion in the Code of Conduct?
Can I just read what I've actually said?
So paragraph 64,
Yeah,
if we can call that up, please.
I've got it here. I think I was referring to a departmental code of conduct. I wasn't referring to the GWC code of conduct, so it's not clear in my statement.
If we could now please call up GWC.001.0011.002. And this is the newer version of the Code of Conduct from March of this year. Do you recognise this document?
I'm not sure if I actually have a copy of this. I could well have. I'd have to look at my computer.
Did you and the other GWC members play any role in developing this code?
No.
Do you know whether you ever formally resolved to adopt it?
No, I can't recall that we formally adopted it.
Do you have any knowledge as to how this code came into being?
No.
Can we please go to the second page, I think it is, of the Code of Conduct? Sorry, the third page. You see that there's a message there from Mr. Duncan Ord,
Yeah.
and it appears from the heading that it's a message from the chairman of the Gaming and Wagering Commission.
Yep.
Do you recall
Yes.
the GWC ever authorising Mr. Ord to adopt a new code of conduct on the GWC's behalf?
I can't recall that, no.
If we can go to page 9, please, of the new version. And you can see there on the third paragraph, if that can be blown up, please. Starting with conflicts of interest can be a key risk area. Do you see that?
Yes.
If you just read that for a moment. And let me know when you finish that paragraph.
I've finished.
Do you agree with the proposition that it's almost inevitable that members will have a conflict at some point?
It's possible. I mean, it's quite broad in that it refers to local governments, communities and private industry. So it's not really just specific to the industry of gaming. It's broader than that. So yes, for example, I could, if I was working for a private industry, have a conflict of interest, but up until this point, I've never worked for or been engaged by anybody in the gaming industry.
Is it common for GWC members to declare conflicts in the course of their work with the GWC?
Yes, it is.
And has that been something which has happened more in recent times, or has it always been common?
It's always been an agenda item, but I think there's obviously a greater propensity for members to be very careful that they declare anyone that they may have met. There's an example of that in more recent time with one of the Commission members, and that's been reflected in the March minutes.
I'm going to refer now to some evidence that's been given by Mr. Connolly, just for the transcript, and I'm not asking for this to come up. It's MCN.0001.001.001, paragraphs 281 to 291. And I'll just summarise the effect of what Mr. Connolly says in his witness statement. He says that it's very difficult to manage conflicts of interest in a casino setting for two reasons. The first being physical proximity, because inspectors are at the casino a lot. They become familiar and friendly with Crown employees. Mm-hmm. And the second is regulation of employment. He explains that people who work as casino regulators for the department or work at the casino will both have similar sets of skills that make them an attractive employee for both the department and the casino, and that people move from one employer to the other. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes.
Do you consider that the tendency to have conflicts in regulating the casino is a problem?
Yes, it could be viewed that way.
And do you have any suggestions for the Commission as to how that might be dealt with?
No, I don't. I haven't given it any thought, I have to say. I'd have to give that more consideration.
You mentioned a moment ago that it was reasonably common for GWC members to disclose conflicts of interest or potential conflicts of interest. Is it similarly common for GWC officers to disclose conflicts of interest?
Well, only the recent example of Mr. Connolly at the October meeting, when it became known to us that he had a personal friendship with, their name escapes me.
Various Crown employees.
Yes.
Did I take it from your answer that the first occasion on which you knew about Mr. Connolly's friendships was at the October 2020 meeting?
Yes, that's correct.
So you had never heard talk of his friendships from anyone else prior to that time?
No.
Are you aware of whether any other GWC members knew of those friendships prior to that time?
I'm only aware that maybe Barry knew, but other than that, no.
It had never been discussed by Mr. Sargent or anyone else at the GWC meetings?
No.
Now, earlier in your evidence, I read out to you some part of Mr. Connolly's witness statement where he suggests that he had effective control of the agenda and the manner in which terms at the GWC meetings were discussed.
Yes.
And you've previously indicated that the GWC often adopts recommendations by officers, although noting that Mr. Connolly did not write that many recommendations. If it was the case that Mr. Connolly or any other GWC officer had a conflict of interest as a result of personal friendships with a Crown employee, do you consider that that may have had an impact on the way that they presented any Crown proposals to the GWC, and in turn, the way that the GWC then appreciated those proposals?
Well, I had no evidence of that, so...
Is that something which gives you any cause for concern now that you have learned about the relationships that Mr. Connolly has declared?
Up until this point, no, I hadn't had any concerns.
I'm going to call up a document now, PCRC.001.001.001. This is not a formal document from the GWC. This is a document that has been generated by lawyers with the Commission, going through agenda items and minutes that we have been provided with in answers to notices to produce.
Can you blow it up, please?
Now, this document is 4 pages in length, and I can hand you a physical version if that would be easier for you to look through.
Yes, please. Thank you.
And it shows the proposals that have been put forward by Crown, as well as the response from the GWC deliberation. And I'll just let you go through that. And if we can go to the next page, please. And down to the bottom of that page. I'll just let you keep reviewing that document.
Right.
And then for the screen, onto the third page, please. To the bottom of the page, please. And to the next page. And to the bottom of the page. And to the final page, please. Now, I'm conscious that you've only had a very limited time to look through that document, but seeing the different proposals that are referenced there, do you have a recollection of seeing those proposals, particularly the more recent ones?
Yes, I do.
And looking at that table and seeing what is by our count 80 approvals, does that feel about right in terms of the number of approvals you would have seen from Crown since joining the GWC as a member?
Yes. And these are over the 2 periods?
Yes.
Yes.
And on the, I think it's the 4th page, there are 2 that are highlighted in red,
Yes.
and those 2 are proposals which are not approved by Crown.
Were not approved by us.
So, I
yes.
beg your pardon, not approved by the
Yes.
GWC,
Yes.
are being proposed by the Crown Perth Hotel or Perth Casino. So would you agree that it is the case that since you've been a member of the GWC, there's only been those 2 refusals of proposals, where there's been a request by the casino and then a proposal or a recommendation put forward by a GWC officer?
That's fair to say that, yes.
And looking at that now and having the chance to see that in a tabular form and seeing that high level of approval, does that give you any cause for concern as to whether at any stage the GWC's decision-making process may have been compromised?
No, because many of these are specific to electronic gaming machines, the changes of those, and they're, for example, 23rd of June, we approved in principle the EGA game Coin Explosions Prosperity Tree and Pompeii Gold. And it goes over to talk about Money Trail and Rising Koi. But they were deferred, as you can see, because there were some issues around the timing.
Well, just while you're explaining EGMs, can you just let the commissioners understand what it is that the Gaming Wagering Commission does when there's a proposal in relation to an EGM, because they occupy quite a number of the agenda items.
Yes. So Crown will come generally into a meeting and present by way of PowerPoint presentation, an electronic gaming machine, what the game is. And for the most part, I'm very unfamiliar with gaming machines, so it was a learning curve for me when I first became a member of the Commission. And so they'll show us what the game does, the ball's all rolling down and the timing mechanism involved in that presentation. And then we make a determination as to whether, in fact, we will approve that game or not, whether it reflects that it might be, in essence, a pokey machine. And it's been a long-standing position. I understand that we've been very much opposed to poker machines here in Western Australia. So we do have oversight for all of those EGMs that come before the Commission for approval from Crown.
Now, one of the proposals that is approved in that table I've provided you is an increase of gaming machine numbers by
Yes.
500 and gaming tables by 350.
Yes.
But that is, I suppose, quite unusual in the sense that it's a very substantive proposal. Most of the proposals are, as you've indicated, electronic gaming machines. Does that, in your view, fairly reflect the majority of what the Gaming Wagering Commission does, that it's primarily operationally focused on matters like individual games?
Yes.
And at paragraph 47 of your statement, you say that based on agenda papers that have been provided to you and from discussions with other members of the GWC, you understand that the GWC has no powers in relation to monitoring or regulating anti-money laundering or the criminal reputation of players, and that Federal Border Protection agencies are responsible for processing and approving the issue of visas to overseas players, and AUSTRAC is responsible for investigation and prosecution of criminal activities that may take place at Perth Casino. Have I fairly summarised that?
Yes, you have.
In relation to that view that was explained to you by others and has been discussed at the GWC, are you able to specifically indicate which persons have explained to you that that was the role of the GWC?
Well, it's also a position that I came to myself.
How did you come to that?
Well, I don't believe it's GWC's role to duplicate the role of AUSTRAC or law enforcement agencies. I do, however, believe that there needs to be greater collaboration and sharing of information so that if there are concerns about organised crime or money laundering, that we are better equipped to be given that information. In the time I've been on GWC, there's never been a referral from police, to my recollection.
When you said that that was a view that you had come to, how did you come to that view? Was that by studying the legislation or...?
Well, we were also provided some advice, I believe, in October.
And are you referring to legal advice? And if so, don't tell me the content of that advice, but are you saying that you've received legal advice?
Yes.
When you say that you've discussed this matter with others in the GWC, are you able to remember which persons on the GWC have expressed this view?
I think at some point we all expressed that view around in a board meeting. Whether it's documented in minutes, I don't believe that I can recollect that at this point.
Did you ever consider, or are you aware of whether anyone else at the GWC has suggested that it might be appropriate to confirm the position, especially in light of the Bergen inquiry and the report that's been produced in that inquiry?
Can you repeat that?
Did you ever consider, or are you aware of any other GWC member having indicated that it might be appropriate to obtain further advice or assistance as to a proper assessment of the GWC's function subsequent to the Bergen inquiry and the Bergen report?
We are looking and reflecting inwardly to those points, but as to getting specific legal advice on that matter, I don't believe that we've sought that.
If I could please call up QNE.001.001.001 and go to page 22. Now, this document has been received by the Commission as a Section 8A response to a notice to produce. Do you recognise this document?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell the Commission what this document is and how it came into existence?
Well, the Commission has sought legal advice in terms of our role and appearing before the Royal Commission, and we've all been supported by Quinn and Emmanuel. We subsequently also had a number of sessions where we had group meetings on Microsoft Teams. We had a facilitator that gathered information from all of us on our views and perspectives of our role on GWC, and this document was subsequently produced.
So this document was produced by a person collating the
Yes.
views expressed by all the GWC members? Is that correct?
Yes.
And then the document was subsequently provided to GWC members for their consideration to approve, is that correct?
Yes.
And so can we take this document as being, in essence, one that you are confident or comfortable represents your own views as to the GWC's functions?
Yes.
So looking in particular at, well, it's physical page 4, but it's I'm told it's page 43, if that can be called up, please. Thank you. And looking at the paragraph above, however, it was not and is not a function of the GWC to investigate criminal activities ex post generally or in relation to junket operators and their clients specifically. And you then go on to talk again about how the responsibility lies on national bodies such as AUSTRAC.
Yes.
So in light of that belief that you have as to what is the role of the, well, rather what the role of the GWC is not, can you indicate to the Commissioners what your view is as to GWC's role? What is its purpose and what is its regulatory philosophy?
Well, I don't believe that we're there to look at these matters, because there are other regulatory bodies that have that oversight and have the requisite skills to actually look at money laundering and organised crime and assessment of whether a person is, in essence, able to travel into the country, obviously through the Department of Home Affairs or Border Force. Our role and responsibility is to look at the integrity of gaming activities and the integrity of the revenue that's collected.
And by gaming activities, do you mean the physical act of gaming?
The oversight of gaming in terms of not just the casino, but more broadly, there's TAB, there's racing and leisure, and there's all of those acts that we're responsible for. We're not just only responsible for the casino.
And that reminds me of something I should have asked earlier. What would you say as an estimate is the percentage of time that the GWC would devote to work on casino matters versus other regulatory matters?
It would be wonderful to have that question on notice. It would be fair to say that it does occupy at least 60% of our time. But really, to give that answer justice, I would like to look back over, you know, board minutes and board packs.
Yeah, so fair to say that it's a substantial amount, but you wouldn't want to be tied down to a specific figure.
Yes, correct.
Are you aware that on the 27th of August 2019, the GWC approved a recommendation dealing with junkets to seek a national framework be developed and endorsing the department?
What's the date again?
27 August 2019.
Right.
And we can bring that up for you. That's GWC.002.0016.0283, and it's page 43.
And this one was written by Mick.
Yes.
Yep, I recall this now.
And the final point there, authorising the department to explore the idea of a national framework for the approval and management of junket activities.
Yes.
In broad terms, can you explain to the Commission why it was that the GWC endorsed this recommendation?
I would contend that we endorsed it largely because we were of the view that there should be some harmonisation across the jurisdictions in terms of junket operations.
Are you aware of Section 25A of the Casino Control Act that allows for regulations dealing with junkets?
I should be aware of it. I'd have to go back and look at that section of the Act.
Is there any reason that, and it may not have been something that was considered, but are you aware of whether there was a deliberate decision made to not, in the interim, pursue regulation of junkets at a local level at this time in 2019?
No, I'm not.
At a broader level, how is it consistent with your earlier explanation to the Commissioners as to what you understand the role of the GWC to be, that is, not involved in crime, money laundering and so on? How is it consistent with that position to simultaneously be looking for a national framework in relation to junkets and the matters that go along with junkets?
Well, I think if you'll reflect back to that time, that's when all of the media allegations were being made about Crown and what was in terms happening with junket operations, and specifically about instances in China with staff being taken into custody.
So do I take it from that answer that you had at one stage, or that the GWC at one stage had thought it was appropriate for GWC to be involved with junket regulation, money laundering and the like, but more recently is no longer of that view?
No, sorry, I'm not quite clear on your question.
So what I'm asking you is that in 2019,
Yes.
it appears that there was an intention for the Gaming and Wagering Commission to seek for a national framework on dealing with junkets.
Yes,
That more recently, you've explained that it's the matter of, well, it's federal authorities that should deal with people coming into the country by way of junkets rather than the GWC. And it seems that there might be a tension between a more expansive view in 2019 and a more limited view today.
well, I think the limited view today is that we actually issued a direction in February that there be no further junket operations.
And in relation to that direction, does it raise the same question, which is, if you don't believe that it's the GWC's role to be involved in matters such as junkets, then why were you issuing a direction in relation to junkets?
That direction was obviously made before we all contributed to the document that you referred to earlier. So it's a bit of a grey area because we're talking about time that's already passed, and now we don't believe we are involved in junket operations because it no longer is allowed.
But one of the reasons it's no longer allowed is because of your direction.
Yes,
And that direction, of course, is because the GWC has determined to exercise its powers because it
Yes.
considered it appropriate to exercise those powers. Is that correct?
yes.
Is the concern that the GWC had in relation to junkets the fact that junkets have been previously linked to criminal activity and money laundering?
Yes.
And so is it the case that GWC was there taking action in an attempt to deal with criminal activity and money laundering?
Yes.
And is that not inconsistent, or at least in tension, with the views that you've expressed in your witness statement and in the Section 8A notice to the effect that that's not the GWC's role?
I still don't believe it's the GWC's role, but we certainly do have oversight and must ensure that illegal behaviour, criminal behaviour, is acted upon appropriately. And as you say, we have the powers in the Act in which we can respond to that.
Would it be fair to say that your thinking in relation to this issue has been evolving over time?
Yes.
Lastly, are you aware of sections 19B and 21A 4 and 5 of the Casino Control Act?
Can you remind me what
So if we can
it
please,
refers to?
If we can please bring up PUB.0004.0005.001. And that's at page 22. So section 19B there allows that the minister may determine, and you can see it says on the advice of the commission.
Yes.
And then it goes
Yes,
on
I
to
am aware of this.
Okay, so you understand that that section essentially allows the minister to direct people to dispose of interests in relation to close associates of a licensee if they're not suitable persons to be close associates.
Yes.
And you can see obviously that the section contemplates that the commission might give advice to the minister to that effect.
Yes, that's correct.
Would you accept that that suggests that the Act contemplates that the commission will be in a position to give that advice to the minister?
Yes.
And would you accept that the Act would contemplate being relevant to issues of suitability, questions such as criminal activity, money laundering and the like? So would you agree that the Act seems to suggest that the Commission may well have a role in investigating those matters so as to be able to inform the Minister to exercise his powers under the Act?
Yes, that's correct.
And similarly, we can now go to section 21A, subsections 4 and 5. Have you seen those subsections before?
Yes.
And again, you'll see that where the Commission thinks fit the opening words for subsection 4, as compared to in section 5, the Minister being able to direct the Commission for an inquiry. In subsection 4, the Commission can, if you like, self-direct its own inquiry and then go to the Minister and provide a report. Does the same logic that I put to you previously apply in relation to this? That if section 21A allows for the Commission to make reports to the Minister, it suggests the Commission must be able to investigate matters to provide reports to the Minister.
Yes, that's correct.
And are you aware that section 21A then feeds into section 21B, which allows the Minister to, depending on the particular circumstances, issue sanctions to a casino licensee, including censure,
Yes.
fine and cancellation of licence?
Yes.
And you'd agree that those particular censures are quite significant responses from the Minister,
They are indeed.
and they would only be appropriate in relation to very significant wrongdoing or I wouldn't necessarily say only unlawful conduct, but inappropriate and unsuitable conduct.
Yes.
And it would be much more than merely problems with gaming or physical gaming or incorrectly played games at the casino, wouldn't it?
Yes. It would be criminal behaviour or money laundering or any of those types of organised crime.
And so do you think that those sections, looked at cumulatively, section 21A and section 19B, suggests that maybe the Act contemplates a wider role for the GWC than the GWC has till this point been taking up?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. No further questions, Commissioners.
Thank you. Mr. Varmananda?
No, thank you, Commissioners.
Ms. Seward?
I think Mr Malone had one short question first, if
please.
Commissioners, that's right. I've only got one question. Ms Hodson-Thomas, I refer to your witness statement at paragraph 60, which is WRT.0001.001.0020. In paragraph 60, you refer to key individuals, and I'm paraphrasing here, who are placed under enormous pressure
Yes,
of a larger workload. My question to you is, do you include in the phrase key individuals Mr. Connolly?
yes, I do.
No further questions.
Seawood?
Thank you. Ms Hodson-Thomas, you were asked some questions about the role or the actual tasks the Commission undertakes at meetings. And I think it was put to you by Councillor Sisting that would it be a fair description that you receive the agenda papers, you then consider them, and then at the meeting you note, approve or reject? Do you recall that question?
Yes, I do.
And I think you said that would be fair. Would it be right that at the meetings, it's not simply a rubber stamping exercise?
Yes, that's correct. We have the opportunity to ask for further information, and there's generally a discussion around the meeting paper that's before us. It isn't just a rubber stamp.
And at those meetings, there will sometimes be departmental officers there to answer any questions you may have?
That is correct.
And is it fair to say the Commission members do ask questions?
We do.
And sometimes it might be a request for more work to be done or to go away and gather more information?
That is correct.
And then at some further meeting, that information will come back at
That-
some point?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And is it fair to say that you're not under any belief or understanding that you must simply agree with a recommendation that's put forward by an officer from the department?
No. Sorry, I'm not sure if you heard that. I said no.
And by no, you mean you don't believe that's what you have to do?
Yes.
You then were asked some questions about the support from the department, and you noted as time progressed, there have been increasing demands on the staff from the department's time in dealing with various matters.
Yes.
And you mentioned the machinery of government changes, local government reform and the TAB, I think, for your answers.
Yes.
Would it be fair to say as well that what's also put pressure on time for departmental officers more recently is the response to COVID-19?
Yes, that too.
And then the Bergen report itself and the associated topics that have come before the Commission have also increased the burden on the particular officers.
Yes, it has.
And the work that the Commission does is not limited to casino regulation. There are a large number of other matters you consider as well.
That is correct.
Now, if in your statement, and I don't need to bring it up on the screen, but in the statement at paragraph 59, you give two examples of times where you consider that you have not received back information in a timely fashion.
Yes, that's correct.
And one of those is in relation to some work being done in relation to KPIs.
That's correct too.
Now, I think you may have been shown these minutes. GWC.0002.0016.0309.
Is there a date of those minutes?
Yes, so these are the 28 July 2020 minutes. Not sure if you have those ones.
It may not be on the hearing book.
Yes. But
Yeah, it
that's
is.
close. Now, I think if we look at the minutes, you are down as an apology for that particular meeting, if we look at who attended.
Yes, I am.
And is that the one I think you might have mentioned before that you couldn't attend for personal reasons?
I'm not sure. It wasn't at the time of my mother's passing, no.
My apologies, I misunderstood. Okay, well, if we look at these minutes, so these are the minutes from the 28 July meeting. If you could bring up page 3 of those minutes. Down the bottom, item 5.3, KPI targets 2019-20. Could I just get you to read the paragraph, 2 paragraphs on that page, and there's a sentence or 2 on the following page. And if you just tell us when you need
Yes, do you want to go with the
to go
next
to the
page?
page, just say when you need to.
Yes.
Yes, please. Turn the page, please.
Sorry, we only have the extracts. We don't have the
Okay,
following
don't have
page.
the following page. Well, I'll perhaps read out the rest of the sentence to you then. So it ended with, which has been set to an unlikely figure. The Commission previously agreed that the number of occurrences identified be reduced from 10 to 1. Some external assistance to develop meaningful, achievable KPIs is currently being sought. Now, I understand you did not attend this meeting. Do you have any recollection of reading these minutes after the event when you were
Yes.
preparing for the next? Is this the issue you were referring to when you said the KPI work had not yet been completed?
No, I think I'm referring to other conversations we've had since, and even in more recent times, even at our last meeting.
And is it about the KPIs for the Commission that need to be reviewed? Is that the issue of concern?
I think we were all trying to get an understanding of what the KPIs actually meant, what in fact they were, what those key performance indicators actually referred to. Were they relevant in the current climate? And so when I say it's not complete, we still have some concerns around that area.
And although you don't have the next page on the screen, the resolution, part 2 of the resolution from that meeting was to reaffirm the Commission's intent to initiate a full review of KPIs to better reflect the desired performance of the Commission.
Yes.
Is that the issue you were concerned about?
Yes.
Okay. And has anybody discussed with you why there still needs to be, why that review has not yet been completed?
We had some discussion at our last meeting, but there's still a view that whilst there's been an agreement about the KPIs going forward, they're still not where we would like them to be.
And is any indication given to you that COVID-19 has slowed down the department's response to doing more work on the KPIs?
Whether that's been said implicitly, I can't recall, but it was an observation I think we all made that COVID, the Bergen inquiry, delayed a whole raft of matters that needed to be actioned.
Thank you. And the other matter that you expressed some concern in your statement about was never seeing a submission from the Commission to the Bergen inquiry. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Do you have any recollection of any discussion at meetings? I'll withdraw that. Do you recall that the Bergen inquiry went into a hiatus for a period of time during COVID-19?
I believe it did, yes.
And do you have any recollection of there being any discussion at any other meetings or otherwise that following the resumption of the Bergen inquiry, there was a switch from requesting a submission to instead departmental officers attending some roundtable regulatory discussions at the Bergen inquiry?
Yes, I recall that being conveyed at a meeting.
And was it also conveyed at the meeting that those regulatory roundtable discussions were instead of the originally requested submission?
I don't have a recollection of that, but that may well be the case.
No further questions then.
I just have hopefully a few questions. First, in respect of the Problem Gambling Support Services Committee.
Yes.
Do you understand that that's a committee of the GWC?
I thought it was a committee that came from the different agencies. Commissioner. I believe that there were representatives from a number of different government agencies that sat around and that they had responsibility for that and that they would report up to GWC.
Is there a member of the GWC on that committee, as far as you're aware?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
And do you receive reports from that committee?
From time to time, I'm sure that there must be some information that's provided or that a staff officer might speak to, but I can't recall seeing a paper on it, no.
Then I wanted to speak to you about the matter of the casino providing loans or providing credit to gamblers. Whilst you've been on the GWC, have you been aware that the casino can only do that with the consent of the GWC?
I understood that that only occurred with junket operations. I may be incorrect, but yes, I believed that they had to seek approval from GWC.
And did you understand that it was the directions that, in essence, provided the Commission's consent for those things to happen to the extent that they were permitted?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you understand now that it is the... Sorry, before I go ask that the providing credit and perhaps loans in a more general way is something that is done in respect of premium players and people participating in junkets?
Yes.
And did you also understand that the directions provided, well, you've already agreed that the directions permitted that to the extent that it could occur?
Yes.
And did you understand that it was the GWC's role to ensure that the directions were complied with?
We should have ensured that they were complied with, but I don't know how that would have been undertaken. I'm not sure what the reporting mechanism is, Commissioner, in terms of what oversight we had over whether that had been complied with.
So was there ever any discussion that you can recall at a GWC meeting level of how the GWC might ensure that the permissions that it had given in that regard were complied with or were sufficient to ensure the integrity of gaming at the casino?
Commissioner, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So I'll break it into two because it really did, involve two issues. First, do you recall at a board meeting a discussion about whether and how the Commission might ensure that its directions about providing credit or loans to gamblers would be complied with?
No.
And do you discuss ever a discussion about whether the directions that the Commission had given in regards to those matters were sufficient to ensure the integrity of gaming at the casino?
No.
And so even when allegations started to be made about junkets and about the integrity, I suppose, of the junket operations, the Commission didn't discuss, well, are our directions in respect of providing credit to international gamblers facilitating or helping maybe to permit, I won't use the word facilitating, that's going too far, but perhaps not sufficiently regulating the operation of junkets so as to ensure that they are conducted in a lawful manner?
If I can just step back, because obviously we were all very concerned, Commissioner, about what was coming out in the media allegations regarding Crown and its suitability in terms of the organised crime and potential money laundering and the issues that occurred in China. We actually called in Crown to come in and present to us, to provide us with some, if you like, comfort that what we were reading, that there was no substantiation to those allegations. So I just want to reflect on our time. So Crown did come in and presented to us, and I have to say their presentation, they refuted all of those allegations. So I think myself and others around the Commission felt that it might have well been a beat up. But as obviously we all know now, that information was sanitised. We weren't being provided with all of the information. That information has obviously come out of the urban inquiry, and it made for incredible reading and made me realise that we needed to do much more. And as the Commission determined in its February meeting, we made a recommendation to the Minister that an inquiry be held. Obviously, on reflection, we should have done much more.
Thank you for that answer, because it, in fact, answers some of the questions that I was going to go on and ask. And so just a few follow-up questions about that is that when you received, I think you had 2 presentations from Crown, did you? One
We did.
August
We did.
2019 and then again in December?
That's correct.
Did you, in essence, believe what you were being told by Crown?
Well, I certainly did in the first instance. The second one, the alarm bells were starting to go off, and obviously that's when we made the determinations that junket operations would be forever not be allowed. But we're only given a certain amount of time in terms of that presentation. The December one, I'm not sure if it was in person or not, whether Ken Barton actually was on Teams. He may well have been in person.
I think, I don't want to mislead you, because I think I might have been thinking about one in December 2020. Where
Yes.
Ms. Coonan
Yes.
attended.
She came in on Microsoft Teams.
And in respect of any of the Crown presentations on the issues that are the subject of this commission, did the GWC discuss obtaining some independent material about the allegations that were being made? So rather than relying upon Crown, asking an expert in casino regulation to report to GWC on those issues.
No, we didn't.
And there was just one final question I have about that, is that in the materials provided to the this commission, there's a letter of the 14th of December 2020 from Crown to Mr Ord as chairman of the Gaming and Wagering Commission. It's about these issues, and it had attached to it a report from Grant Thornton.
Was it the Angove report? No, sorry.
Grant Thornton,
yes.
about the Riverbank
Accounts.
All I wanted to know about that was that, and it also I think had an initialism report attached to it, all I wanted to know was whether the GWC members were provided with that.
I can't be certain.
Its attachments.
I'd have to see the documentation. quite possibly was in a board pack, but without actually seeing it, I can't really answer that, Commissioner.
Just for various reasons, I'm perhaps a bit reluctant to show it to you at this time, but it would have, does it refresh your memory at all? It would have been quite thick and had a lot of bank statements
No, I don't recall
of
seeing any.
Riverbank and South Bank.
No, I don't recall ever seeing any bank statements.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Ms Hudson Thomas, I've got just a couple of questions. Can I come back to you remember the questions that Mr Lee asked you right at the end about, framed around sections 19B and 21A of the Act, and it's this question of whether the role, if any, for the Gaming and Wagering Commission in looking at matters such as money laundering and criminal activity, criminal infiltration generally. That's the subject matter. And I understand, what I understand you to be saying is that it's not outside the remit of the Gaming and Wagering Commission to be looking at matters like that, because it is in the public, it's a matter of the public interest, the community interest, for those things not to be occurring in the casino.
Yes.
But for various reasons, duplication, lack of resources, there are other bodies more capable of doing that.
Yes.
That's your position generally?
Yes, it is.
Can I put this to you as a slightly different way of looking at it, and it is at the level of process and systems. You're aware, aren't you, of the Casino Operations Manual?
Yes.
And that any changes to the Casino Operations Manual require the approval of the Gaming and Wagering Commission?
Correct.
So therefore the Gaming and Wagering Commission has an interest, if I can put it that way.
Yes, we do.
In the manual. And if you can take it from there, that maybe to a limited extent, but there are anti-money laundering aspects in the Casino Operations Manual. Against that background, might it not have been appropriate to have audit processes where the Gaming and Wagering Commission was satisfying itself, and it would be for the benefit of Crown as well as for the benefit in the public interest, that the systems were working?
Yes, absolutely.
Was that ever a matter that was discussed?
In more recent times, we've all expressed our concerns around these issues. We've certainly asked what happens to some of those bank statements that are provided from, obviously, the Riverbank account. Whilst there was reference in that presentation that the casino made to us in August 2019, the extent of what actually transpired in that account, we didn't have any information. But certainly there needs to be better processes and audit around what is collected by members, the information that's provided from the casino to staff members, because I understand that they do collect those bank statements, and what, if any, processes are in place to actually identify, or are they even equipped and skilled to identify where there might be red flags?
Thank you. Going to a different topic, it's the question of the resources and budgeting. We heard evidence from a departmental officer, which was, and council will jump up, no doubt, if I am getting this terribly wrong, but was to the effect that we don't go asking government for money. We simply work with what we're given. This is the departmental officers. Could I put it to you that the Gaming and Wagering Commission, that is populated largely by people from outside the department, might be in a better position to make it clear to government where the lack of resources is impinging on the proper functioning of the organisation?
Yes, it should be incumbent on the Commission to do that, but we haven't.
Now, and finally, can I ask you two questions about the broad issues of governance? I've read somewhere that I'm asking you for your impression. You've been on working with the members of the Commission, and it's changed from time to time over a period now. So I'm asking your impression as to how you think this how cohesive the board is and how it actually operates. And I've read somewhere that a board should respectfully encourage robust and sceptical questioning of the issues that are before it. How would you rate the Gaming and Wagering Commission against that standard?
I would say I don't want to say it's below standard, but it could certainly be better in terms of best practice and sound governance principles. Given we're not independent, it makes it very difficult to have perhaps some of those robust questioning and probing that should occur. I also think my view is that there should be an opportunity to have in-camera sessions whereby members could sit separate to the department to have those conversations where we are concerned. Certainly in more recent time, because we've all sought legal advice to appear before us, it has only been the Commission members without the Director-General. So there have been some much more robust questions and concerns raised, and it's been encouraging to see that. And if I can reflect on my peers, I think the more recent appointments to the Commission have been really sound appointments. Carmelina and Jodie, as I said, have great financial experience, and having that financial lens is something that has brought me greater comfort. Steve Dodson comes out of law enforcement, although he's a financial planner now, and Tilly as well, and is also a highly competent person. You can see they're all professionals. They all understand good governance principles. They are all of inquiring minds, and we are all very concerned about aspects of what has occurred and what has evolved. And having Barry there, given his corporate knowledge, is also, in my mind, very good as well.
You mentioned the in-camera discussions with our departmental people. Have you ever thought of the efficacy of the provision in the Act which requires that the chair is ex officio, the Director-General of the department? Has that been a matter that you've thought about?
I've thought about it in more recent times, but certainly not discussed it around the Commission, no.
And have you formed a view on that?
I have the view that we should definitely have an independent chair, and a model similar to that that we see in New South Wales, where it is totally independent.
Thank you. My last question is, you've mentioned that there have been several more recent appointments, and in your view, they've been good ones, and it's worked. But can I ask you this: were you consulted about the intention to appoint those people to the board of which you were then a member?
No, and we don't. We haven't set it up like. If we were to refer to good governance principles, you'd look at a skills matrix and who sits around the table, what skills we all bring to the table. No, I've never been consulted, but I can say that I've been impressed by the appointments in recent times.
Well, that's encouraging, but it may be by happenstance.
Yes.
So in terms of good governance, a more contemporary model that had a nominations committee and that sort of thing would, in your view, be appropriate, would it?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Lee, is there anything arising from that?
No, thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Evans?
Thank you, Commissioner. Hopefully only three. Ms Hodson-Thomas, you may recall the council took you through a number of delegations.
He did.
And towards the end of that, in fact at the end of it, he made the proposition to you that the effect of those delegations might be thought, and my apologies, Mr Lee speaks rather quickly and my note is not as perfect as it might be, but it was to the effect that the effect of those delegations might be seen as subverting the purpose of Parliament in relation to the oversight of...
Is that how he phrased that question?
that is how I recall it.
Okay. And did I answer yes?
I think you answered to the effect of yes. Could you just bring up section 16 of the Casino Control Act? Sorry, the Gaming and Wagering Commission Act? I don't have a number for it, I'm afraid. It is the delegation for it. Maybe you just zoom in on subsection 1. I'm going to put this to you as an experienced legislator because you were a member of the Parliament for a number of years. I want you to read the delegation provision, in particular the latter two lines before A, B, and C, and the last two lines. I'll just give you the opportunity, having read that,
Yep.
to ask whether you wish to add anything to the previous answer.
Well, I should have said no to that question, but I felt under pressure.
Thank you. Can I then take you to GWC.0002.0016.0283? And this is the, do I have the right one? This should be the meeting of the 27th of August, that's correct, 2009. It's the item of business relating to the review of the junket operators regime. I think it's at page 45 of the document. Yes, perhaps you can just roll back slightly. You'll recall that council took you to the summary, which I think might be on about page 41 or so. That's it. And in particular, the fourth bullet point, that is the authorisation to explore the activities, the idea of a national framework.
Yes.
As being inconsistent effectively with the position which was stated in the answer to the notice to produce.
Sorry, what was your question? Yes.
So it was, effectively the proposition was that the endorsement of this was inconsistent with the notion that we didn't properly have a role, the Commission did not properly have a role in this space. Can I just take you to what the actual basis of that recommendation was? It's on page 45 of the document.
That's the difficulty of answering a question without actually reading the full background to the paper.
Yes. And perhaps I could invite you to read the paragraph commencing regardless, and perhaps we can zoom up to the second half of the page from there.
Regardless, I think, as a group of regulators, is that the one you refer to?
The commence is there, that's correct.
Yeah.
And does that assist you in recalling the rationale for endorsing?
Yes, I do recall that now. And it is consistent with my thinking. I think that we need more broadly a national framework in terms of dealing with this so that there is consistency and that the broader community can actually have confidence in it.
Thank you. And finally, there's nothing else you wish to add in relation to that?
No.
Thank you. Finally, in relation to a question from Commissioner Jenkins, there was the substance of which was whether you were, you considered there was any action which should be taken in relation to the revelations which were coming forward as a post-2019 in relation to junket operations and money laundering. Could you just put that in the context of your understanding of any other regulatory activities which are taking place outside Western Australia at that stage?
Well, the Bergen inquiry was being undertaken, and we were of the view that we should await the outcome of the inquiry, and that it would provide us with obviously findings that would either confirm or deny the allegations that we were reading.
Was the Bergen inquiry the only inquiry which you were aware of at that time?
Also, I think the Victorian regulator was actually looking into the Crown Casino, because they have a 5-year review into Crown, and that was also undertaken during that period as well.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Evan. Ms Hodson-Thomas, thank you very much. That has been great assistance to us, and we're grateful to you, and we're able to release you from the effect of the summons. You are now free to go.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of procedural matters. If you'd like to leave, you may, or if you wish to hear us.
I'd like to stay in here.
I'm sure you would. Thank you very much. Just a couple of matters. The document GWC.0002.0016.0309 I think needs to be supplemented with one additional page, Ms Seawood, is it?
Yes. Only
Just one? So the version that's on the hearing book, and which will eventually be made public, is to be supplemented with an additional page. Mr Lee, the tender of documents to which you've referred, do you have a list?
Your Honour, Commissioner, we do. The only concern I have is that we received a letter very shortly before the hearing commenced indicating that there were some concerns with some of the items in the list, and we haven't had an opportunity to consider that letter. So I'd be reluctant to attempt to tender at this stage until we've considered that.
All right. Well, then we'll, subject to that, we'll deal with it the same way as we did with this morning's tender. That you prepare a list, and it can be included in the written copy of the transcript by direction of the commissioners, as if it had been formally tendered in open session. And I'm assuming that the redactions of private information and otherwise from the statements of either or both of Mr Beecroft and Mrs Hodson-Thomas are in order, so that those witness statements can be made public. And, unless anyone has anything else, we will adjourn and resume at 10 a.m. on Monday morning. Thank you very much.
Rise.